Mitzi Sanchez came into the world on August 10, 1992, in Vallejo, California. She was raised in a big, tightly connected family that included 2 brothers and a sister. Mitzi was a lively and intelligent child. She loved being outdoors with her friends and spending time playing with her siblings. From early on, Mitzi was fairly self-reliant. When she began elementary school, her parents let her walk there with her brother without any adult oversight. The schools sat only a short distance from their house, with most of the path running alongside a busy street. August 10, 2000, marked Mitzi's 8th birthday. She was thrilled about the celebration her family had arranged for her. Mitzi asked her mother if she could stay home from school for the special day, but her mom refused. Mitzi felt disappointed, and around 7:30 a.m., she left the house with her brother. After her classes ended, Mitzi was expected to wait for her brother so they could walk back home together. But when her brother stepped outside the school, he wasn't able to find her anywhere. Believing she had already headed home without him, he made his way back alone. But it turned out that Mitzi wasn't there. Their older sister, who happened to be home at the time, instantly grew concerned. Since Mitzi had been looking forward to her birthday celebration, her absence seemed unusual. She waited for a while, hoping Mitzi would eventually appear, and at around 4 p.m., the sister chose to call their mother and inform her about the situation. Their mother immediately phoned Mitzi's school and discovered that her daughter had been present for all her classes. The mother then contacted family members and Mitzi's friends, but no one had seen her after school. Mitzi's relatives became alarmed and began searching for her. Numerous people, including family, friends, and neighbors, joined the effort as well. Together, they swiftly put together an enormous search. While some people walked through the streets, others went door to door along the path between the house and the school, asking whether anyone had spotted her. They even began creating and handing out flyers with information about Mitzi. Despite all their efforts, they were unable to locate her, so Mitzi's parents chose to call 911. The police immediately joined the search, and the local media began reporting on the case that very same day. Mitzi's disappearance instantly drew public attention, since similar incidents had already taken place in their town before. For several years, an unidentified perpetrator or possibly several perpetrators had been abducting children in Vallejo. The most recent incident had occurred in December of '99, less than a year before Mitzi went missing. 7-year-old Ziana Fairchild, who lived only a few miles from Mitzi's home, vanished on her way to school. Despite every effort by both the police and the FBI, she was never located. Now, when Mitzi disappeared on her way home from school, investigators feared that the same perpetrator might be responsible. Although there were no leads at that point, the striking resemblances between the 2 cases were immediately apparent. However, Ziana's case had remained unsolved, leaving detectives with almost nothing to work with. They began re-examining everyone who had previously been considered a suspect in her case, but this produced no results. The following day, Mitzi's disappearance appeared in headlines not only in local news but throughout the entire state. Everyone feared that a serial kidnapper was still active and dreaded the possibility that he might escape justice once again. Mitzi's relatives gave numerous interviews, hoping to bring more attention to the case. Her mother also pleaded with the potential abductor to return her daughter unharmed. The police received many tips, but none of them led anywhere. However, everything changed 24 hours after Mitzi disappeared, when something unexpected occurred. A man contacted law enforcement, telling them that he had found blood-stained rags at a landfill. Upon examination, specialists concluded that the rags were actually bedsheets from a hotel in Vallejo. Although they sent the evidence to a laboratory, the blood analysis would take several days. Investigators also visited the hotel but were unable to verify whether Mitzi had ever been there. With nothing to do but wait for the lab results, investigators searched through the landfill, hoping to find additional clues, but they found none. The next day, August 12th, the police received another call, and it immediately shifted the course of the case. At around 11 a.m., a man reported that he had been driving through an industrial area in Santa Clara when a young girl ran up to his van, screaming that someone was chasing her. She climbed into the van's cabin, and the driver noticed a man running toward them. The girl shouted that he had kidnapped her and intended to kill her. As soon as she was inside the van, the perpetrator turned around, entered his vehicle, and sped away. Meanwhile, the girl told the driver that her name was Mitzi Sanchez, and he contacted the police. Officers quickly picked her up and transported her to a hospital for examination. They also called her mother and allowed her to speak with her daughter. Soon after, her relatives rushed to the hospital and reunited with Mitzi. Meanwhile, detectives interviewed the van driver. The man turned out to be a crucial witness. He recalled the license plate on the kidnapper's vehicle because it drove off right in front of him. It turned out that the driver was on that road almost by coincidence. He had a day off but had been asked by his supervisor to cover a shift and deliver a load. If he hadn't been there, the perpetrator might have been able to reach the girl again. The police ran the license plate and identified the car as belonging to a 39-year-old man named Curtis Dean Anderson. He had already been on law enforcement's radar with previous convictions for theft, kidnapping, and suspected involvement in other crimes. As investigators concentrated all efforts on locating the abductor, their colleagues prepared to hear Mitzi's account of what had happened. She explained that on August 10th, she had been eagerly waiting for school to end so she could go home and celebrate her birthday with her family. When her last class ended, Mitzi chose not to wait for her brother and headed home by herself. Just a few hundred yards away, she noticed a car parked by the roadside. Inside sat a man watching her closely through the rearview mirror. Mitzi felt uneasy about him but quickly dismissed the worry. It was broad daylight, she was walking along a familiar street, and being a child, she didn't fully understand the danger strangers could pose. As Mitzi neared the vehicle, the man stepped out and asked her for help. He told her he needed to retrieve a roll of tape from beneath the car seat. He also claimed he couldn't bend down himself because of a leg injury he had gotten from falling off a bicycle. Despite her discomfort, Mitzi agreed to help him. At that age, she was unable to fully recognize the possible threat from an adult man, and her parents had always taught her to assist people in need. As soon as Mitzi reached for the tape, the perpetrator shoved her inside, covered her mouth with his hand, and slammed the door. Mitzi attempted to scream, but it was already too late. The kidnapper drove away in an unknown direction, leaving her to stare out the window in terror. At one point, they passed by Mitzi's house, and she saw her family preparing to celebrate her birthday. A few minutes later, the kidnapper pulled into an empty parking lot. He handed Mitzi a change of clothes, forced her to put them on, and threw her original clothing into a nearby trash bin. He also warned her not to attempt escaping, claiming he had a gun and that no one had ever managed to get away from him. Over the next several hours, he drove Mitzi in an unknown direction. At one moment, she asked him why he had kidnapped her, and the man merely replied that the same thing had happened to him when he was a child. When night fell, he parked again and began covering the car windows with rags. He then produced a chain and fastened it to Mitzi's leg with a padlock. After that, the perpetrator took out a bottle of alcohol and forced her to take several sips. Mitzi tried to resist, but eventually did as he demanded. Then the man grabbed a camera, took several photographs of Mitzi, and lay down to sleep inside the car. Mitzi tried to stay awake, afraid of what might happen if she fell asleep. She thought about how she might escape and at one moment noticed a police car passing by the parking lot, but it was too far away. Even if Mitzi had shouted, the officers wouldn't have heard her. The next day, the perpetrator continued driving her around the city. He made her sit on the floor of the vehicle and covered her with sheets to keep her out of sight. At one point, he stopped and stepped outside for a few minutes. Mitzi tried to pull her leg free from the chain but soon realized it wasn't possible. She also found a nail file and tried to pick the padlock, but it didn't work. When the perpetrator returned to the vehicle and drove away, he claimed that he had stopped by her parents' house. The kidnapper had pretended to be a concerned resident asking for flyers to hand out throughout the town. Mitzi was stunned and overwhelmed. She had been so close to home, yet still remained in captivity. Over the next several hours, the perpetrator stopped multiple times, getting in and out of the car. In the evening, he drove outside the city and parked in a remote location, where he sexually assaulted her. Afterward, the man fell asleep, leaving Mitzi in a traumatized state. The next morning, he drove away once again, making several stops, mainly to buy alcohol and cigarettes. At one moment, when he leaned into the vehicle, something fell from his pocket. He told Mitzi not to look there and walked away again. But the girl didn't obey him. She looked down and saw a large bunch of keys. Mitzi quickly understood that one of them had to unlock the padlock on her chain. She feared what he might do to her if she disobeyed him. But eventually, Mitzi found the courage to act. She grabbed the keyring, selected the key that seemed to match the lock most closely, and tried to open it. To her astonishment, it worked. Mitzi freed herself from the chain. Now the only thing separating her from freedom was the car door. Mitzi opened the window and attempted to climb out, but encountered another obstacle. She was so exhausted that she could barely move her legs. Summoning all her strength, she managed to lift herself and jump out of the car. As she crawled around the vehicle, she saw her kidnapper, who immediately caught sight of her. The man began shouting for her to come back. But Mitzi had no intention of surrendering. With the last of her strength, she ran in the opposite direction. The perpetrator pursued her while Mitzi tried to flag down passing cars. She waved and screamed, but each one drove past. Still, Mitzi kept moving toward her freedom. She knew with absolute certainty that if she stopped even briefly, the perpetrator would catch her and harm her. Everything happened quickly, but to Mitzi, the moment felt endless. Eventually, she spotted a van, ran toward it, and jumped directly in front of it. The driver stopped immediately, and Mitzi climbed into the cabin. She was terrified, dehydrated, and starving, but her life was no longer in immediate danger. At the hospital, doctors provided her with the necessary care, and not long after, her entire family arrived to reunite with her. Mitzi's astonishing rescue instantly became the top story in the city. When she arrived home, thousands of people had gathered on her street. They applauded her and shouted belated birthday wishes she had missed. Meanwhile, police were searching for the kidnapper, whose location was still unknown. When they showed his photograph to Mitzi's mother, she realized she had actually seen him twice before. The first time had been before her daughter's abduction, when he stood on their street looking toward their house. The second time had been the day after Mitzi went missing, when he came to their home and asked for flyers. The search for Curtis continued until late that evening. Police placed surveillance on every known location he frequented, and eventually their efforts succeeded. He arrived at a trailer park and was arrested without resistance. Curtis was taken to jail to await trial, and detectives began investigating his potential ties to other crimes. The man had told Mitzi that she wasn't his first victim, and that no one had ever managed to escape him. Investigators found it difficult to believe that this had been his first crime of this nature. All of his deliberate and seemingly pre-planned actions indicated that he had considerable experience committing such acts. It is worth noting that Curtis had previously been imprisoned for kidnapping a woman in 1991. He had been released in November of 1999. And now, police felt certain that after his release, he had murdered at least one girl, 7-year-old Ziana Fairchild. But we will come back to that later. There was also no doubt that he intended to kill Mitzi. Moreover, one particular detail clearly showed that it was supposed to happen on the day she escaped. Police learned the reason Curtis had stopped in the industrial area. He had previously worked there at one of the companies. And that day, he had visited his former coworkers. He had asked them for a large bag, and detectives immediately understood that he had planned to dispose of a body in it. After Curtis's arrest, Mitzi had difficulty recovering for a long time. However, she soon learned that the police suspected him of abducting Ziana, which made her feel even more unsettled. Although Mitzi was grateful that she had managed to escape, she also worried about the fate of the 7-year-old girl. More than 8 months had passed since Ziana's disappearance, and there had been no information about what had happened to her. Mitzi wanted to help find her, so only days after her own rescue, she participated in a search effort alongside other volunteers. Unfortunately, they were unable to find any clues about where Ziana might be. This continued until January 2001, when a human skull was discovered in the mountains near Santa Cruz. Forensic analysis confirmed that it belonged to Ziana, and she was officially declared deceased. Mitzi took the news extremely hard, but another challenge still awaited her: the trial. It began in April of that same year. Mitzi had to testify in front of the entire courtroom and describe in complete detail what Curtis had done to her. He was also present, but despite that, Mitzi managed to complete her testimony. Ultimately, Curtis was sentenced to 251 years in prison, but that did not conclude his story. Detectives continued to visit him in jail and questioned him about potential involvement in other crimes. At one point, they learned that Curtis had confessed to a fellow inmate about kidnapping and murdering 8 additional girls. The inmate agreed to cooperate with authorities and repeated Curtis's statements in detail. But Curtis himself was not ready to reveal all of his secrets. He did not deny anything, but attempted to negotiate various privileges for himself, speaking to detectives in cryptic hints. Eventually, the man indicated that he had indeed murdered Ziana Fairchild and that he had killed at least 13 other girls and women. It was not until 2005 that he gave a complete confession in Ziana's case, and for that, he received an additional 50-year sentence. As for Mitzi, her difficulties did not end with Curtis's trial. Only a few weeks after her rescue, she returned to school, where she faced bullying from other students. They called her the kidnapped girl, told her she should have died instead of being saved, and behaved in extremely cruel ways. As a result, her school years became a heavy burden, and combined with the trauma she had endured, it hindered her recovery. Mitzi also repeatedly joined searches for other missing children, but most of the time, the searches ended with the discovery of their bodies. Each time, she felt the tragedy as though it were her own, and eventually she could no longer bear the weight. Alcohol became her only way to cope with the stress, and with each passing day, Mitzi relied on it more and more. Eventually, she no longer saw even the faintest possibility of returning to a normal life. But one day, everything changed. Mitzi was involved in a serious car accident after attending a party with friends. She broke her neck and her arm and spent 2 weeks in a coma. When she woke, doctors informed her that she was pregnant and would be having a daughter. This news completely transformed her outlook, and Mitzi found the strength to turn her life around once more. She chose to devote her time not only to her daughter but also to other children who had become victims of crimes. She founded a nonprofit organization that continues to assist those in need to this day. As for Curtis, he died of an illness in 2007, only 6 years after receiving his sentence. The only thing detectives regretted was that they had not been able to obtain complete confessions from him regarding other cases in which he was suspected. Although those cases remain unsolved, police continue to regard his involvement as highly likely. It is also worth noting that Curtis had a son who followed the same path as his father. He was convicted of murder and in 2019 died in prison. If you found this case intriguing, make sure to like and subscribe. We upload new crime case videos every night. Stay tuned and brace yourself for what's coming next.